Guys, gonna kickstart here. So, very good evening to everyone here in India. An absolutely beautiful morning to everyone who's watching from California or from the East Coast. A very good welcome, warm welcome to all of you. My name is Vibha Kagzi, and I'm going to be your host today. As a lot of you know, I am the founder and chief education officer here at ReachIvy.com. And at ReachIvy, we help students determine their study abroad and career aspirations. Um, I'm just going to wait for Susan to come back on. And what we discovered through our journey is that a lot of young people are unsure about their career paths, and therefore we decided to invite experts from different career domains to our show every week. So we have a show called House of Experts, where we bring in an expert a week, and the expert talks about their lives and their journeys so that we have some food for thought and inspiration for people who are also considering these
Our
paths.
connection's a little off.
Okay, I think you're back
there
on, Susan. Yeah. So I can hear you, but your visual is a little... Yeah. Can you see me and hear me, Susan?
Yes, I can now. It was a little unstable a moment ago. Yes. Can you see me all right?
Yes.
Let's see. Okay.
And now I can. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, I can see you now. Yes, perfectly fine. Okay, everyone. So I'm gonna just kickstart by first introducing Susan. So Susan actually has worn many hats throughout her life. She's an engineer, then went on to doing her MBA at the University of Chicago at the Booth School of Business, and then had a corporate career for many years. Then she gave birth to 3 children. So she's raised 3 children who are pretty much along similar age groups, and she's going to talk a little bit about that. And then she reinvented herself once again from being a doting mother to figuring out a career in yoga. And along the way, she's done many certifications. She's gone into the depths of aerial yoga, hatha yoga, vinyasa, ashtanga. I mean, name the style of yoga. And when I spoke to her, she seems to have done it all. So I'm personally very excited to have Susan on the show because I've been a benefactor of her amazing handstand workshop. And for anyone who hasn't done her handstand workshop, you're definitely missing out on something. Her next workshop is in July, and all of you watching must obviously follow her on Insta so you can stay tuned for all her amazing handstand tips, and stay tuned for all her workshops. The next one will be in July. Most likely, I will be doing her handstand workshop once again. So for anyone who's missed out, you must definitely join. So Susan, firstly, thank you so much for being on the show. It's an absolute
Thank you for having me.
And, considering we are in India, and when I was looking for someone to represent yoga as a career domain, despite all the amazing yoga teachers here in India, somehow something about you and your journey really sort of, hit me at a personal level. And it was interesting because I didn't know your background, in engineering and the MBA and all that. And still somehow something connected me to you, So I feel like a strong connection with you, honestly. And I'm just glad this worked out. So without much ado, I'm just going to jump right into the interview. So since we're an education company here, ReachIvy, I always kickstart by asking people about their educational backgrounds. So if you could give us a quick walkthrough of your life, with your early education and just the early journey of your life, please.
Sure. Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me here. It's my pleasure. And it's great to see your smiling live face this morning. So just a little bit of background on me. I grew up with a soldering iron in my hand in the basement, building electronic kits. I was a very popular little girl. I loved building things always, and was always tinkering down in the basement. And so eventually built some more complex things. My biggest success was a shortwave radio, which took me forever to build. But it worked, and it was really exciting. And I ended up deciding I wanted to go to college to study engineering, probably as a result of all the work that I did in my basement with my soldering iron, and also earlier work that I did with my Lego. And that's just relevant to understand how my brain works, how I like to pull things apart and put them back together. I was doing that at a very young age with the things that I had available to me at the time. Um, and I went to college to study engineering. I was a mechanical engineer, and after college, I worked in engineering. I worked in plastic part design, actually. I worked on an injection molder, designing
Wow.
plastic parts, and eventually negotiating raw materials in plastics. So not doesn't sound like very much of a yoga journey, but yoga wasn't even something that I was doing at the time. So that's kind of my background. I spent 4 years, as I said, studying mechanical engineering and working as an engineer.
And then how did the MBA come around?
Well, good question. I wasn't originally thinking that I would go back to school again, but once I started working in engineering, I was working for Xerox, a small company called Xerox, and I was really intrigued with the business side of engineering. I worked on a plastic part commodity team in the larger materials management group, and
Okay.
realized that I liked the business side of engineering and had the opportunity to work with some amazing mentors. One of the mentors that I worked with was the VP in my materials management group, and he was a University of Chicago alum, and he encouraged me to go back to business school to fill in the gaps and to expand my horizons a little bit. And so I worked for a few years, and then 2 years, actually, just 2 years, which is a pretty short amount of time before you go back to business school, as you may know. But I was ready at that point to shift careers and had an opportunity to go back to business school in Chicago, which I took, which was great.
Okay. So engineering, business school, and now, what I call you like the best handstand coach in the world.
You're
So,
very kind.
so join the pieces for us. How do you go
Okay.
from doing the MBA to, having 120,000 followers on Instagram purely for your handstand and your yoga journey? It's absolutely fascinating. So,
Yeah.
sort of bridge that gap for us. How did you go from here to there?
Yeah, well, we talked about this a little bit before, which is it's kind of a funny story that I did not really look for yoga. Yoga found me, so I wasn't really looking for yoga. Yoga found me, and it found me through a girlfriend who asked me to come with her to a yoga class, and I thought it sounded fun. I was a very involved athlete. I always loved athletics. I swam competitively in school, played multiple sports, and I had been windsurfing, and I did kind of a lot of, like, I would call them like agro sports. I biked, I windsurfed, I did things that were like high intensity. But so my job was also super high intensity and super challenging and stressful. And so my girlfriend told me that I needed to come. I needed to come to yoga. And I went with her to, at the time, there weren't yoga studios every half block. It was in the early 90s, and one of the bigger studios in Seattle, where I was living at the time, was a Iyengar studio. And I didn't really understand. I just thought yoga was yoga, which it is in many respects, but I didn't know what I would be getting into. I went with her to a 2-hour class, and it was so slow. I hated it. And
Yeah.
I hated it all the way through for the whole 2 hours. And I especially hated the end of the class, where we did something called corpse pose, Shavasana.
Right.
And I didn't understand what it was. And it was almost 20 minutes long. And I thought I was going to leap up and run out of the room. I thought it was just literally painfully slow. I was making my grocery list. I was thinking about all the things that I needed to do the next day with work. I was thinking all the things that I could be doing if I was not in that room lying there for 20 minutes. It
You
was
were
like, it
being an
went from,
anti-yogi.
Yeah, I was terrible. I was terrible. And I left the class and my girlfriend asked me, she said it was, oh, so amazing. And didn't I think it was amazing too? And I said it was awful. I hated it. And she said, what did I hate about it? And I said, I just hated how slow it was. And she said, well, then you definitely need yoga. And so
Right.
I went home and thinking I would never do it again. And then I thought about it and I wasn't one to step back from a challenge ever. And so I thought, obviously a lot of people really loved it. My girlfriend, who I loved it, and we had a lot of similar personality traits, and I was determined to figure out why she loved it so much.
Right.
So I went back.
Okay, so it started with hate, and then it moved to love, and then it
Mm-hmm.
moved to obsession. Okay, so anyone watching, if you've been through a similar experience with yoga, we'd love to hear your thoughts on the chat. So if you want to just, put in, like, if your first time doing yoga was, you had a negative experience with yoga the first time, do put your comments in on the chat, and we'd love to see what you have to say. Okay, so Susan, for you, when did yoga go from, being a one-time experience to a career choice? How did that transition happen where you took it on so seriously as a profession?
Yeah, well, it was over a long period of time. I've been practicing yoga for over 25 years now. And at first it was just something that I really enjoyed doing. And it was felt really good in my body. And it was a really good balance to the other things that I was doing. So it always just kept me in that really nice balanced place. So if I did something where I felt sore or tired, yoga was kind of my happy place. And just so slowly over a period of time, it became more and more what I wanted to do and what my body was really loving. And you mentioned this earlier, that I had 3 kids very close together in age. It's really rough on your body, no matter what everyone says. And yoga was something that kind of kept me steady all the way through that. It was not just a physical thing, but it kept me really balanced. And I started to really crave getting on my mat every day. And I started actually, I was asked to teach after I'd been practicing for a long time before it was required that you had any specific training. And so I started teaching on the side for a friend of mine, subbing for her classes, and I enjoyed it so much I thought I should go back and do a little more. And it was perfect because my kids were getting older, so I had an opportunity to do less on the household engineer side, and I was
Sure.
running a small startup business, doing some management consulting from my home, and more out and about. So I went back and started to study different forms of yoga. I actually first went back and got certified to teach aerial yoga, which
Hmm.
I had loved. It was great for my back. I was having some back discomfort at the time, and loved aerial yoga. Became certified by 2 women who are in Cirque du Soleil. So they were
Wow.
very, very impressive. Yes. Can't do anything like what they could do, but it was just really impressive. And then it rekindled my passion for yoga. I went back and got basic certification, then just kept going back for more additional training. I'm kind of one of those people, back to that engineering personality, that I like to read a lot, study a lot, and to figure things out. And it wasn't just figuring out the physical side of yoga, it was figuring out what was going on up here, which is really what yoga is all about. So
Sure.
yeah, so that was something. So it was just
Okay.
it was a gradual transition. It wasn't
Okay. It was gradual.
one day.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
It wasn't something you had planned, or it wasn't like something you constructed in your engineering sort of
Mm-mm,
approach.
no.
You just went for a class, someone asked you to sub their class, and then sort of things took off
Yes.
from there. Okay, great.
Yes, which is not the way I normally function. I'm usually super planned out and super structured, but sometimes you have to just be open to looking at all the opportunities around you and seeing what finds you joy. And we were talking about this before, but I have 2 kids that played lacrosse. So anyone who plays lacrosse, it's a stick and ball and you're throwing from person to person. My husband coached lacrosse and he always said, keep your head on a swivel. So keep your head on a swivel. So you're always looking around you, and it's very appropriate for sports as well as your life, is looking around at what opportunities are available and also what brings you joy. And if you can marry the thing that brings you joy and there's an opportunity to do it, it's the perfect combination for happiness in life. So
Sure. Wow. So you've reinvented yourself, a couple of times. So it seems like almost every decade
mhm.
you've done something that's sort of pivoted and done something new. I'll just read out a few comments here. Yes, Riti, thank you. I love how the more discomfort felt during the first few experience with yoga, the more yoga is needed. Absolutely. Question here is, how do you get kids to enjoy yoga? They're full of energy. How do you calm them down? And how do you get them to love yoga? Have you had any experience with kids and yoga?
Yeah, yeah. So, well, having three children and wanting them to practice with me is part of my experience. And also, I've taught some children's yoga classes and some family yoga classes. So I
Okay.
often have children of all ages in my classes. I think for getting children involved, you have to understand their attention span based on their age and make it fun for them. And what is really enjoyable for you in yoga is understanding how it's affecting your mind and body. But for the children, it's maybe not about mind and body. Maybe it's about making animal shapes, or maybe it's about really focusing in on their breath. So depending upon the age of the child and their frame of reference, you can make it really fun for them. I taught a class to a room full of 12-year-old gymnasts a few months ago before coronavirus. And it was really interesting because I thought, since they were gymnasts and they were used to training, that we would have more of a yoga, like a traditional yoga class. But even with a group of female gymnasts who could very easily do a lot of yoga poses, they wanted to just have fun. And so I think that you have to remember that you have to make it fun for children if you want them to understand the benefits, and let them figure it out for themselves, how it feels in their body, and then how it affects their mind and their breathing and calms them down. So attention span, make sure
Yeah.
you pay attention to how much attention span they have based on their age.
Okay, Ayman, I hope that answered your question. She talked a little bit about understanding, approaching yoga through shapes or through animals,
Yes.
and being mindful of their attention span. Thank you for answering that. I'll take another question here from Pranoti Narware, who says, how would you define yoga? Do you have your own definition of yoga, Susan?
Yeah, I do actually. Well, yoga means union. And for me, it's very much about the link between breath and movement. And it is simply just that for me. It's linking breath to movement. And so sometimes yoga for me looks like sitting and breathing. That's linking breath to movement. And sometimes yoga for me looks like repetitive handstand practice. So it really is just linking breath to movement and paying attention to what your body needs at the time, and then being able to get the benefit of that union of linking breath with movement. So there's no one lineage of yoga that I feel is better than others. Different lineages appeal to different people for different reasons, and I think it's all good. And all yoga links breath with movement. So there's that similarity across all lineages of yoga. So that's what it means to me.
Okay, thank you for sharing. I hope that answered
Mm-hmm.
your question, Pranati. I'll take another question here from Sabahat, who says, how has yoga transformed you personally, both emotionally and physically?
That's a good question. I think it continues to transform me. So it was definitely a transformation in mind first, knowing that I could slow down, control my breath, and then control my mood through controlling the fluctuations of my mind with my breath. Um, and then I started to see the physical aspects of it. So it's so tightly linked, the mind and the body. When you feel good in body, your mind is clear. When your mind is clear, your body feels good. So
Absolutely.
it was definitely, that's definitely how it's transformed me over time. And what I've noticed is the more you practice, and you may have noticed this as well, the more you can tap into that quiet place. I call it the eye of the storm. So it's that quiet place in the middle. So things can be swirling around you. If you think of like a tornado or swirling wind and clouds, and you're standing in the middle of it, that's that wonderful place, I call it, that you get to at the end of a yoga class, or maybe even during a yoga class, where you feel that yoga buzz, that really lovely, relaxed feeling where everything kind of like lets down. And so that's where I'm always striving to be, in that quiet place. And being able to tap into that quickly translates to being able to tap into it quickly off the mat. So when things are stressing you out, whether it's at work or at home or just in life, being able to tap into that quiet, deep breath, assess the situation. It serves you well in life in general. So with your kids when they're frustrating you, all of that.
So are you able to do that successfully? Are you able to tap back into your sort of happy, quiet space once you've disconnected from your physical practice? Are you able to do that successfully?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Most of the time, I would say it's always a work in progress and a process. So none of us, it's never perfect,
Hmm.
but I feel that I'm able to tap into it more easily. And I'm reminded to tap into it when I need it. So when things are kind of spiraling out of control, I try to. More often than not, I'm successful, but not always. I mean, that's life, right? So yes, I'm able to tap into it more and more the more I practice.
Okay, great. Thank you for sharing. I'll take a
Mhm.
question here from Shalini who says, I want to get back to yoga after about 8 odd years.
Mhm.
How and where should I start?
It's a great question. We're always coming in and out of our yoga practice. So when people say they want to get back to yoga, I always say yoga is always there for them. So whether you haven't started practicing yet, or you're interested in starting, or you used to practice and you've taken a little bit of a break, it's always there for you. If you have not been practicing very long and you don't have a home practice, there are great free resources online through YouTube or right even here through Instagram. There's enormous inspiration here. There are people who are sharing flows, tutorials. There's a lot of yoga teachers that are in the social media space, and you can find them very easily. And if you want something a little bit more structured, which I highly recommend, there are a couple really great platforms. We can share the links to them later for classes with really highly qualified teachers, which I think is great, that you can do in the comfort of your own home. And then there really is nothing like going into a classroom with a teacher and feeling that feeling of all the room breathing together and being led through a practice. But because obviously of the times we're in, that's more difficult to find these days, or maybe you don't have access to that right now, or have never had access to it. There's great resources online where you can take live classes with people right here on Instagram, or you can pull classes that are very specific to what you need right off a platform. One of the platforms that I really like is, it used to be called Yoga Glow. Now it's just called Glow, Glo. And it's a very nominal monthly fee, which is about the price of one yoga class where I live, but gives you unlimited access to thousands of classes. And you can pull up a class that's perfect for you. You can pull up a
Right.
beginner class. You can pull up a class that's 20 minutes if you just have 20 minutes. You can pull up a class that's 90 minutes and slow because you want that day, or
Sure.
60 minutes and fast. So there's a lot you can find out there very, very easily. And a lot of it is free, quite honestly. So
Okay. So you're saying that there's sort of there's no such thing as like losing your yoga practice.
mm-mm.
You just
It's
sort of
always there.
start, it's always there for you. Okay, great.
Exactly.
Uh,
If you remember that yoga is just linking breath and movement, we're all practicing yoga really every day.
at all points, right? Okay, thank you.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay, I like that answer. Shalini, I hope that answered your question. We have a compliment for you here from Abel who says, I loved your indoor climbing routine. Oh my God,
Yeah.
I saw that routine. So for those who haven't seen it, please go on to Susan's Instagram and you have to see this. It's basically her sort of climbing down the staircase in her house and then doing this like twist. I mean, it's mind-boggling. And since Abel brought that routine up, how do you juxtapose your life as a mountaineer climber, which is
hmm
obviously it's a very different mind space with yoga? How does it complement or contradict your yoga practice, the high
Um,
intensity sports that you do?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that yoga complements every other activity. So, any activity, especially that's very rigorous and takes a little bit of mind over matter, is greatly aided by yoga. And in particular, the linking of breath with movement and the ability to move your body in space is really valuable for climbers. I always say to people who climb, yoga makes me a better climber, but also climbing makes me a stronger yogi. So climbing, I build a lot of strength that helps me in my yoga practice, but things get tighter, and then yoga kind of stretches everything back out again. And more than the physical side of it, there's the breath linked and mental side of climbing. Climbing is like solving a puzzle on the wall, and yoga is sometimes like solving a puzzle within your own body. How do you move your
Sure.
body in different directions to find different shapes? So there's a
Sure.
lot of overlap in all sports and activities with my yoga. Yeah.
Okay, great. I like that. So it's sort of everything complements one complements the other and sort of and then sort of fits in. Okay.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
um, so going back to the career behind like the yoga teaching. So
Hmm.
how did you do that, right? Because there are a lot of people who practice yoga.
Hmm.
A lot of people get certified. As I told you, I'm certified as a teacher
Hmm.
too, but I don't have a business practice, right? So how do you go about establishing a business practice? What are some of the things you have to think about? If you could just walk us through that journey of making it more from a passion to a profession.
Okay. Yeah. So when I first, to be honest, when I first studied, went to get my 200-hour yoga teacher training, I was not thinking I would teach. I was just doing it to deepen my own practice, which a lot of people do, because they're curious about yoga,
Exactly. Yeah.
physically, yeah, and
Yeah.
curious about the practice of yoga. And so I really just did it because I thought it would be
Sure.
interesting. But then I found that I really enjoyed the teaching side of it. Um, d so just to back up a step, like you definitely don't go into teaching yoga thinking you're going to make a ton of money to start.
Sure.
Um,
Okay.
and it is really hard because yoga studios are businesses, and most of them don't make a lot of money off their classes. They do make a lot of money off their teacher training, to be honest. So
Mm.
um, every yoga studio is incented to offer teacher training because that's how they bring in a lot of revenue, a lot of
I see.
students. They require their students to take classes at the studio, so it's very profitable for studios. So that said, it's relatively easy to go out there and get your yoga teacher training. So first of all, I would just recommend that you be super selective about where you train and who you train with, because everybody is looking to pick up yoga students into their teacher
Ah,
training. And
okay.
you'll see studios offering teacher training 2 or 4 times a year, and that's why.
Sure.
So I
Okay.
just want to put that out there, that like I
Okay.
understand the business side of
Sure.
yoga, um, but if you want to teach yoga, it depends on your marketplace. You have to step back and look at your marketplace. I live in Portland, Oregon, and it's very popular out here. It wasn't when I first started practicing. There were just a few studios. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the call, there's a studio every
Lots of,
half block, right?
yeah.
Yeah. So like how do you make money? And it's not very complicated to know that depending upon the marketplace, different studios pay an hourly rate, or sometimes they pay an hourly rate plus a price per head. But
Sure.
now with the virus and people being constricted in terms of the number of people they can have in their studios, that model is kind of changing. And the other thing you have to take into account, if you're a yoga teacher at studios, most often you'll find yoga teachers work at multiple studios, and the reason for that is the studios like to have a variety of teachers, and
Uh,
then the teachers need to go to multiple studios. If you have to go to multiple studios, you need to take into account the travel time, transit time, if the studio requires you to be there early for students and stay late for students,
sure. Mm.
the amount of, so if you break out your day, how many hours you have to teach in a day, and you're traveling around to different studios and you have to be there a little early and stay a little late, it's not really possible to teach in a
Right.
classroom environment more than a certain number of classes a day, right?
Sure.
So that's part of your equation for how do I make money. So then the
Hmm.
next equation for your business is, well, maybe you take on some private clients. So private clients can be pretty lucrative, but how do you get those private clients? Well, you meet them in the studio, but they're already paying for the class. So it's hard sometimes if you're going to have a private client. And then, of course, these days with our studios here in town aren't even open again yet.
Right.
So if you need to meet a student in a studio, that's really hard. So starting last year, I started to just backing up a step. When I was doing my teacher training, one of the students in my class was on Instagram, and she was practicing yoga and teaching yoga on Instagram, and I didn't even know really what Instagram was. I knew my children had Instagram accounts, but I didn't know. And she talked about it for quite a while, and I got really curious. So I had my, at the time, 14-year-old set up an account for me on Instagram, and
Wow.
then I show me how to post, and I just watched some yoga students, um, and I watched some yoga teachers teaching on Instagram, and I realized that there was an opportunity to teach in that space. So in parallel with the fact that I was teaching in yoga studios, I started to participate with other yoga teachers in these yoga challenges. And what I found that was really interesting, that really appealed to my engineering brain, was the iterative way that you could teach when you were teaching online. So in a classroom, you have to be pretty organized. But when
Right.
you're teaching online and you're trying to deliver teaching snippets in like a 60-second little block over a multi-day period, you have to be very, very organized, and you have to be structured, and you have to be extremely clear. And those things all appealed to me in terms of the way I taught. So even though I was still teaching in a studio, I started to teach over the years, couple years. I haven't been doing it for very long online, not even 5 years. I started to teach online, and see that you could really teach over a social media platform like Instagram. And as I started to teach, I realized that people really liked what I was doing, and that was kind of an aha moment for me, because again, it wasn't something that I'd planned out, which I normally plan everything out. It wasn't something that I planned out, but I realized that the way I was teaching and what I was teaching was resonating with people. I did not go onto Instagram to create a following so that I could teach yoga. I went on
So,
Instagram in a curious way, with
okay.
curiosity.
When did you say you started the Instagram account?
I started the Instagram account in 2000, actually the very end of 2015,
Okay.
beginning of 2016.
Okay.
And I really I call it yoga stalking. I just watched people for a while to see what they were doing and to try to understand, and out of curiosity. And then I just participated. I was not, as I said, I did not come on the platform, and that may sound kind of silly because a lot of people do, they like buy accounts,
Right.
they'll buy followers.
Follow.
I really wasn't doing that for any reason at all. I mean, I truly was
Sure.
just on it to learn from other people. And it just opened my eyes. I had no idea, because, you do yoga where you are, where you live, with the resources that you have. And even though I'd done a little bit of online yoga, with some online platform classes, I saw these yogis from all over the world doing these really interesting flows and transitions. And it just opened my eyes to what was available. If you can't necessarily get to a workshop with someone who's a skill in something, like for instance, hand balancing, you can do it online.
Sure.
And it was just starting to become available. People were putting a ton of content out.
Sure.
So I just started to put content out and share what I was learning, share tips, share tricks, share multi-day approaches to different skills and different flows. And as I said, that is how my account grew.
And you weren't
Um,
even monetizing this, right? You were just sort of sharing content.
No, I honestly, I was not looking to monetize it at all. I was looking to learn. I actually just joined Instagram so that I could learn from the larger yoga community. And then I still am learning from the larger yoga community. And now I'm adding my voice into the teaching community.
Okay, so for anyone who joined post the introduction, I would strongly recommend you follow Susan on Instagram. I'm like a stalker, Susan. Just a full disclosure, I stalk you every day
That's
because
good. That's fine.
the tips, the techniques that Susan describes, and the detailing and precision in her videos. Because even in the chat, Susan, I'm seeing people saying hi to you from Ukraine, France,
Oh, hi.
Spain, obviously the United States. I'm seeing this fan following of people, and you've
Hmm.
clearly, been really able to sort of come into our homes and help us. So
Hmm.
truly grateful to you for doing this, and I'm
Thank you.
sure so many people are thankful to you. If you could just talk a little bit about, those online workshops you were doing,
Hmm.
that, if you tell people a little bit about that, then I can also share my experience of having been a participant in one of your workshops.
Yeah.
So maybe first let's do a little bit of the fun stuff, right? So what about some tips on how to get that handstand right? Because I've been obsessed with, cracking that handstand. For all my friends know, it's just my obsession right now. I'm
Hmm.
clearly nowhere close to being able to do the handstands the way you demonstrate, but maybe some quick tips on, how do we get that handstand? What's
Yeah.
the secret? What's the secret?
I always say there's not just one secret, so I'm sorry to tell you that there's not just one secret. But there are a lot of, I call them little secret sauce moments, little things that you can do to improve the progress that you have. And I just want to back up and just say that, like, handstand is a great goal, but it is definitely about the journey. When you're looking at yoga in general, and then you're looking at more advanced skills like a handstand, which isn't really traditionally like a yoga move, it's more of a kind of gymnastics hybrid yoga move.
Right.
But you see all these yogis doing handstands, and you're like, I want to do that too.
Yeah.
And they're fun. It's great for you from a blood flow perspective, and it is really exciting. Emotionally and physically to be able to do them. It is not about the handstand. And if you come to my handstand workshops, you know that we spend most of the time working on drills and time at the end working on handstand. So just like putting the handstand in context. But in terms of my secret sauce tips, my big overarching tips are one is to slow down. Slow down. Everybody's in a rush, and you need to just like let go of all that and just slow down. So as I said before, it's about the journey, the overall journey. It may take you 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years, or 10 years. You've got to slow down. And then you need to slow down on a daily basis. You need to slow down and figure out what's going on in your body, that whole mind-body connection. And I see people kind of rushing to do things. You really can't rush it with a skill like handstanding, because you need to build up the mobility and the strength, and it needs to meet in the middle. So some people are very mobile and not strong. Some people are very strong and not mobile. In order to do more advanced skills, you need to be both strong and mobile. So if you have been working on yoga for a while, you know, like building strength takes a long time in the gym or on the yoga mat. And same thing with building mobility. So my second thing would be, you know, take your time and also understand where you are on the spectrum of strong versus mobile, or strong and mobile, and figure out in the middle. And then the third and final thing I would say is mastering the little things, because it's about building up the little things into a bigger thing. And it's really that way in life, right? I mean, we don't go out there and say, I'm going to do accounting tomorrow. If I'm going to be an accountant tomorrow, you have to build up all the skills along the way to become an accountant. I didn't decide one day I wanted to become an engineer. I had to build up all the little pieces. It's the same thing with something like handstand. You need to figure out what all the little pieces are that you need to build up, and you need to build each one up and build this like very nice stack of skills that ultimately brings you into a handstand shape. And I guess the only one more thing that I would say is that to remember, it's called handstanding. So we're standing on our hands. And so your bottom of your foundation, the bottom of your building, what keeps you stable and keeps your building or your handstand from falling over is your hands. So in my workshop, we start talking in a lot of detail, day one, about hands, hand strength, wrist strength, forearm strength, because you can't build a strong building without a strong foundation, and you can't build a strong handstand without paying attention to your base, which is your hands.
Sure. Okay. So I do, you know, everything you're saying sort of rings home, because I remember during the workshop, I was actually surprised for the first 3 days, we didn't even do a handstand.
Right.
You know? And in my head, I was like, dude, I signed up for this handstand workshop. I'm dying to do this handstand. And I realized you're so focused on sort of, as you keep saying, you keep using these words, you sort of break everything down and you build it all back again.
Exactly.
So, and I noticed you were doing that. You know, you would focus on one specific muscle group, and then we would focus on the drills only for that one movement. And then in the fourth and then fifth turn, when you put it all together, it suddenly all made sense. You know? So
I always say to my students, when you get upside down, everything that I've told you is going to like drip out your ears. It's just going to fall out of your head when you're upside down. So we have to build everything right side up or on our back, but in a way that makes sense in our body. So that when we flip upside down, it just becomes, it's very natural, and you understand the cueing. Because when somebody says to lift something and you're upside down, does that mean lift it or lower it? So we work on everything right side up or on our back before we get upside down. And we work on all those components that you were talking about. The little tiny building block pieces that build a really strong foundation in handstand. And if you think about it, you know, off the mat, obviously anything that you learn to do and learn to do really well, you've built a very strong foundation first. And you have basically been able to spring off of that strong foundation to move forward. If your foundation is not strong, you're always going to have to go back and be fixing it, or
Sure.
you're going to get injured. So in yoga, we don't want anyone to get injured.
Sure.
If you build a house without a strong foundation, the house is going to fall down, and we don't want that either. So
Sure, absolutely. I completely agree. So you said,
yeah.
the first thing you said is go slow. Just take everything very slowly. Okay, great.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. If you could talk a little bit more about, like especially with COVID, a lot, especially in India, everything is closed. I
Yeah.
haven't had
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
yoga class in like 3 months.
I know.
Ordinarily I'd have a yoga teacher 3 times a week.
Mm-hmm.
So, when I saw your workshop online, I immediately sort of, signed up. So,
Yeah.
how did that idea emerge? And sort of combining that with, just how do you make, you spoke a little bit about this, like how do you make this a full-time profession for anyone
Yeah.
who, who consider this, and how have the workshops panned out for you commercially? Like, can you actually make a living off of this whole, it's great
Yeah.
as a passion project, but is this something that you can actually sustain as a career?
Yeah, those are great questions. I did not originally plan on doing the workshop. Again, the workshop is something that actually came to me because people kept asking when I was going to come to their location and teach a class. When was I coming? When was I coming? And
When,
it's just
when
not
are you
possible.
coming? When are you coming to India? We're waiting.
As soon as I can. As soon as
As
I
soon, as
can.
soon as you can, and I
I
and I'm
need to
gonna.
come back to
You need to
India.
come back
Oh,
to
I'd
India. Yeah,
I'd love to
yes.
come. Yeah, I'd love to come. Um, I I created the workshops based on demand because if for those of you who do follow me, I'm in year 4 of a challenge online that we call Resolution Handstand, which is just about practicing your handstand a little bit every day, 5 or 10 minutes a day, and then every 3 months we do a challenge where we offer up drills and we play around with different leg shapes, basically just as a diversion to get people to get on their hands. I mean, there's lots of fun shapes you can make, and I didn't even know about any of these fun shapes like 5 years ago. So, in fact, I didn't even handstand 5 years ago. So it's all just in good fun, and it's all free. But people were asking me more and more for help online, and could they work with me? And so that's why a year ago I started doing one-on-one training. And I sat down with someone and I was talking with them about what I was going to offer online. And I was torn between wanting to offer this like full boat array of services. Like I'm a power vinyasa teacher. I can teach aerial yoga. I can teach hatha. Maybe we should do some meditation. Oh, and I'll do some handstand on the side. But if you have a little bit of background in business, you know that scattershot diversification approach is not necessarily as effective as being more honed in on exactly what is your offering.
So
And so that's how,
there's your Chicago MBA coming to play, and when you
Mhm.
said, okay,
Exactly,
with strategy,
exactly.
okay,
Yeah, so I was talking it out actually with a friend of mine who is a yoga teacher and coach in town, really dear friend, and she said to me, "Well, what is it you really love to do?" And I said, "Well, I love it all, but I really love teaching, and I really love teaching more of the advanced skills because it's hard, but it's also extremely rewarding for both me as a teacher and for students." And it was like a light bulb moment because it's like, oh, aha, there's my differentiator because there are just a million people out there just doing a lot of the same things. So I would say the very
right,
first thing that you need to do in this whole yoga economy is you can't be doing what everybody else is doing. But you don't want to go in thinking like, what can I do that's different? You want to think, what do I have to offer? Like, what is
right.
it about me that makes me different, and to differentiate yourself that way. So you're not going to make yourself into something. You need to see what resonates most with people. So I obviously saw that what resonated with people was more of my handstand journey, my inversion journey, and also understanding that, I'm not a gymnast, I'm not a dancer, I'm not a bodybuilder in terms of
Sure.
strength. I'm an older yogi. I'm in my mid 50s, and these are skills that I learned in the last 5 to 8 years.
Sure.
So age is not a determination. So I learned that was something that was um,
So you figured
something
out
that was.
what you enjoy doing, and then you
Mhm.
build sort of a competitive edge, and a
Mhm.
niche, as opposed to
Mhm.
doing sort of the generic what everyone else is doing. So you're
Yeah.
suggesting that you find your niche, your space in
Yeah.
this clutter. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Because it
Uh-huh.
is a little bit of, not in a negative way, clutter, but like there's so many yoga teachers out there and there's
Yeah,
so much. So you need to figure out what it is that you have to offer
sure.
and what it is that differentiates you in the marketplace. So my
Okay.
differentiator is definitely my approach to yoga in terms of my engineering like approach to yoga, which it's just fascinating to me. I'm always reading books on yoga biomechanics and
Yeah,
anatomy just because I'm fascinated by it. And also my approach is one thing, and also just the skills that I was able to teach. And I knew that I could teach them online because I'd been teaching them one-on-one to people for a year. So my question was, could I teach that in a larger environment? And then there's a perfect storm of opportunity, which was the coronavirus and the rise of people looking for online offerings and people realizing that if you resonate with them, it doesn't matter if you're in India and Portland, Oregon, right?
sure.
You're able to talk real
Yeah.
time. Here we are talking across time zones halfway around the world, and you're able to seek out experts in things. Your traditional geography is not a barrier. So
Right.
that happened as well. So I would say again, it was kind of the perfect storm of opportunity. And then the question is, how do you take advantage of it? And this is how you have to figure out what you're doing. So my very first workshop that I offered, some of you may have been there and you may have seen this as well, but I offered a free donation-based workshop just to test and see what the
Yeah.
interest was. And it was all brand new to me. I'd never taught a group class via Zoom, and I'd never, I
Yeah.
hadn't ever tried a big group class.
I was on that workshop. That was the one
Yeah,
I did. And
the
if
very
now if
first
you're
one.
telling me it was your first one, it didn't seem
Hmm.
like your first one, you know? And I
Yeah,
remember when I tried logging on to that workshop, I was thrown off the first class because you had more than 100 people signed up for that workshop, you know?
yeah.
So when I saw that sort of reaction to your workshop, I was the next morning, I was logged on to that Zoom 30 minutes before, and then you upgraded it to like a 500 plus account.
Exactly.
But there was
So once
so much
again,
interest. Yeah.
yeah, so once again, I didn't really anticipate the level of interest, and I had just a basic Zoom membership, and I thought for sure I would have more than enough room. And day one, we had way too many people, like immediately, and I thought it was just an outlier.
Yeah.
So I waited until day two, and people were telling me that they had logged on. I was getting hundreds of direct
Yeah.
messages, and people were telling me that they were logging on 30 minutes ahead of time, and it
Yeah.
was full. And so, yeah, I upgraded it, and we had 170 or 80 people
Yeah. I remember.
on each call twice a day. So I had
Sure.
about 300 people a day. So obviously, I offered it for free to just gauge the level of interest from a business perspective. And then I realized that there was a big level of interest. So then I backed up and I thought, how am I going to make this into a little bit more of a business? So it's worth the amount of time that I'm putting in, obviously. And now I'd been teaching a lot, but I'd never taught in a big group setting like that. So I'm glad that it didn't seem like it was my first one, but I was kind of
Yeah.
petrified. I wasn't sure I'd be able to touch
So,
everybody or
so
see
now,
everybody.
now have you been able to monetize that model?
Yeah. Yeah.
You have.
So what
Okay.
I'm doing personally, and it's different for everyone in terms of what you're offering and how you offer it. But for me, the way I'm monetizing it is a low barrier to entry in terms of the price point, but a large number of people, and we can do that
Okay.
obviously because people are now awake due to being quarantined and coronavirus to the opportunities that they have to take classes or trainings. Online via Zoom. And so I'm very careful to make it accessible to everyone. And if someone approaches me and they're unable to pay for whatever reason, I always give them access because my goal is accessibility and to be compensated for
Hmm.
my time to prepare for class, teach the class, and answer all the questions because I get tons of people sending me questions and videos, and I answer every single one of them during the workshop. Offering that, so you can kind of do the math, but
Sure.
offering that the next time I offered it, I charged a small fee, $10 a day, US, and with a discount if you're there for all 5 days. And even though I didn't have quite as many people, I had a very large number of people. I had 133 unique people from all over the world coming to the
Okay.
workshop. And I'm going to be doing another one the very first week of July as well. Same exact thing. And this one will have two time frames. I did two the first time. I did one the second time because it was so time consuming. But I had to go back and I had to put some infrastructure around my business. I had to update my website. I had to put in payment processing. I had to kind of, based on the feedback I was getting, I focused in on exactly what people were looking for and how best to teach those skills online.
Sure.
And so it was a learning process for everyone, but yeah, you can definitely monetize it. So now my business looks a little bit different. So I'm not teaching in a studio now, because the studios I teach in are not open again yet. They will be in a couple weeks, but I'm not going back to teaching the same way I was teaching before. So my business will break out between three different things. My business will be some live in studio classes because I love it and I like to have that interaction with students. I also do workshops here locally, but now I'm offering these workshops, these bigger workshops online. And then I also still have a small number of private clients that I work with every single week. So I'm balancing out all of those components, and that as a whole is actually enough to, that is a full business right there.
Okay, so you said you'll still continue a little bit of the touch and feel model, and then the private classes are also, some of them digital. I know you offer the one-on-one training digitally as well.
Yes.
And then the larger workshops. So you've managed to figure out three different formats. And what I find most interesting, and for a lot of us watching, some of us want to pursue yoga, and I have a friend here, Ratna, who's an avid yogi, and she's definitely going to sign up for the July workshop. What I'm understanding is that you basically, like, the opportunity hit, sort of your preparation, and you test ran with that free workshop, and basis what you saw, you sort of fine-tuned and tweaked the model. I think you were just brave enough to sort of, go for it, and also offer it for free. I think what a lot of people try to do is they try to monetize very early on.
Right.
Because they just sort of like, oh, I'm not going to do anything for free. I've got to monetize every little thing I do and say.
Right.
But what I notice a lot about what you've done and what you do every single day through your Instagram account, right? You're just so generous in giving away free knowledge and tidbits that it then comes back to you, hopefully manyfold. And that's something, I feel a lot of business people and a lot of freelancers, they're too short-sighted about everything they offer, And I feel like with you, the way you've been explaining your process and your mindset, it's very, very generous. You just give,
Right.
And then it boomerangs back to you somehow.
I feel like you can feel when people are trying to monetize every single little thing versus people who are sharing knowledge. I want people to come to me because they like what I'm sharing. And I do give a lot of things away for free, obviously. Yeah. I have people who are reaching out to me all the time for help, and I help them because I can. If I wasn't able to, because I was too busy, I would share that with them too, that, I'm not able to get to everyone, but while I can, it is really what I give. And I think another thing you mentioned is really important is doing your market research. So, I mean, my free classes were really my market research. So I sat back afterwards. Where were my students coming from? What time zones were they coming from? What problems did they have? What's working? What's not working? What is what is it that the market is asking for, right? And so there's a lot of people offering classes. I work with several large studios that have just a giant number of teachers teaching at them, and watching what people were doing over the last few months. Everybody's trying to just take a little piece of the same little pie. And what I'm saying is you maybe need to create your own pie.
Correct. Yeah.
So, because that pie only has so many slices.
Sure. Yeah. And I love the flavor of your pie for sure, because I tasted your pie. It's a great pie for anyone who hasn't tasted it. I had a question earlier on in the chat. Someone was asking about your inspiration. Raj was asking, could you share who inspires you? You inspire many of people. Who inspires you?
Oh, that's so sweet. Gosh, I find so many people inspiring that have been physical teachers that I've worked with. So I think the question is about which yoga teachers inspire me. There's a teacher in out of San Francisco named Jason Crandall, who I've studied with a lot, and I love him. He's just amazing. I love his practical and way of looking at the body and at your yoga practice, and I think he's fantastic. There's another teacher who I love out of Boulder, Colorado. Her name's Amy Ippoliti. I really admire her as well. I really admire teachers who are giving back in different ways. There's a teacher who I've crossed paths with many times named Tiffany Cruikshank. She's currently out of Seattle, Washington, but she used to be right here in Portland. And I love what she's doing in terms of her teaching and also her giving back to the community. And I think that's what it really comes down to is I like a combination of teachers who teach but are really giving of their time and energy and resources. Jason Crandall, his wife, actually used to work for Yoga Journal, and she has a really great podcast called Yoga Land, and they're constantly giving back. It's a free podcast, and he's on that podcast all the time. And so again, I really admire people who both have a practice but like take their practice off the mat onto the real world and continue to give back. And I like to think that I'm modeling myself somewhat after them as well in terms of giving back in other ways. So
you absolutely are. So the inspirations have definitely rubbed off on you because as an outsider and someone who's following your journey, it absolutely seems like you're just always giving. In the workshop you were just so giving. How you answered every question in so much detail. I was blown away that it was a free workshop and you were just so out. You just put yourself out there. Quite incredible. Okay, I think 2 minutes left on this Insta Live before it just automatically will disappear. I just for everyone who's listening, just any words of advice for people who just for their personal yoga practice. If they don't want to do handstands and anything as funky, just what would you tell people in terms of like just building a yoga practice for themselves?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's important to take classes with different teachers in different lineages of yoga and find what resonates with you, and then take more of a deep dive into that type of yoga. The more you do it, the more you're able to create your own home practice. And that's really where I think you'll start to feel the yoga take over your mind and body, is when you can practice on your own at home. That is where that's where it really resonates with me. I mean, I love taking classes with people, and I can sometimes find that kind of buzzy, as I mentioned, center of the storm in classes, but more often than not, I find it when I'm practicing by myself in my own space and doing what my body is really needing at the time. So I would say take as many classes as you can, learn from people, and then try to incorporate the practice into your own home practice that you do every day.
Okay, I think that's a very useful tip. And I think it applies to yoga and any other skill that you're actually trying to build, You sort of go to a class and then you have to come back, and it's really the work you do at home that helps you inculcate that practice. Okay, that was extremely helpful. You want to announce the next workshop dates so that people have that? You said July first week?
Yeah, it's the first full week of July. So that is the 6th, Monday the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th. So it'll be July 6th through 10th. There'll be information on my website and on Instagram. It's also going to run during the Resolution Daily Handstand Challenge. So I have 4 other hosts on that challenge who are incredible. Most of them are yoga teachers as well, and they've been practicing for a long time. And we pool together our resources and our best skills, tips, and tricks. And then you have a great community of people who reach out and support you. It's like your own cheering squad on your journey. So yeah, so join me.
Okay, okay, guys. I'm going to personally vouch for the workshop, and as I said, I might just do it again.
So you should actually.
I will actually. Let me figure out my schedule.
I do have students who do it multiple times. I do different drills every time I do it. Okay. So you're definitely would love to have you again.
Okay, great. Thank you. And thanks again, Susan, for sharing your journey, your wisdom, and everything you share. Just I can feel the warmth all the way from across the Atlantic, or right here in my bedroom.